is a good presenter that we can have a look of some of their videos and to learn from their public speaking. Then we'll continue from here.
Amy Cuddy is the most successful female speaker in the history of the TED conferences. She's the second most popular speaker of all time. She's had tens and tens of millions of people watch her speech. It's linked below. I want you to look at it, analyze it. Now, this intrigues me at many, many levels. I have some mixed feelings here, and I hope I don't offend any of you needlessly. I do think she is a great speaker. So when I look at her style, her packaging, how she crafts her speech, how she delivers her speech, I think it's excellent. I think it's sort of a textbook example of what to do. Where I'm torn is I listen to her message and I think it's the worst possible message. Her message basically boils down to, you want to be confident before giving a speech, a presentation, a job interview. Stand like Wonder Woman and you'll be filled with confidence. And this stance will make your posture full and you'll just be full of confidence and you'll be great. Now it turns out that the research allegedly supporting this cannot be duplicated, and the research has been called into question, and most people consider it debunked. The far bigger issue I have with this is I think it's irrelevant just feeling confident. I can feel confident, but if I'm giving you an incredibly boring presentation, it doesn't matter if I feel confident. So I kind of feel like she's one of these diet guru, analogous to a diet guru, who says, you know, eat M&Ms twice a day and you'll lose a lot of weight. Well, if you only eat 2 M&Ms a day and you eat nothing else, yeah, you'll lose weight. But no one can do that, and it's not really going to solve your long-term health problems. It's kind of a waste of time. It's diverting people from what really needs to be done. If you're really overweight, you need to eat healthier food, fewer calories, and exercise more. If you're giving a really boring speech, just feeling confident isn't going to help you. The solution is give an interesting speech. In fact, if you want a role model, I would suggest no better role model than Amy Cuddy. If you actually look at how she constructs her speech, it's textbook perfect. She focuses on just a couple of ideas. She does a great job of weaving in a personal narrative. She tells a story in such a compelling way. She talks about being in a car crash, and being in a coma, losing IQ points, having to fight back her own fears, insecurities. It's an emotional ride. You feel for her. She comes across as just an extremely likable person, a nice person, someone you'd want to have at a dinner party with your family. But guess what? That's pretty much what every public speaking book says on Amazon, and there's 20,000 of them, and they all tell you, focus on fewer ideas, use personal examples, tell stories, bring in emotion, connect with the audience. She moves around some. She smiles. She does all the things, frankly, that I recommend to all of my clients and that you're hearing throughout this entire course. So I think she's a great role model in that regard. Where I am lost, though, and feel bad is it's just yet another gimmick. It's telling people kind of what they want to hear. It's like, here's a Thigh Master machine. Don't worry about exercising a lot or doing any strenuous exercise or changing your diet. Just buy this infomercial gadget and put your legs together or something, and that's going to make you thin and beautiful. It's yet another gimmick. So this one hits me kind of hard because I constantly see people on the internet and elsewhere say, well, if you just visualize people in their underwear, you'll be fine. Or if you tap on your face enough, you'll get over fear of public speaking. Or if you take a beta blocker, or you get hypnotized. All these gimmicks. If you use Prezi and use animation, your speech will be fine. Well, no. If you want to give a great presentation, you need to do the hard work of coming up with interesting ideas, which Cuddy did, coming up with a compelling story for each idea, which Cuddy did, practicing your speech many times, preferably dozens of times or hundreds of times or even thousands of times, as I suspect Cuddy did. Practice on video. Keep doing it until you love your speech. Then and only then are you ready to give it, and then you'll be filled with confidence. The problem, of course, if you do a TED Talk and you say that, you'll get about 3 viewers because it's not sexy. It's not some quick gimmick fix. It's not something that helps you avoid doing the hard work of what's actually necessary. Nonetheless, I do recommend you watch the video. If you agree with me, you can leave comments in the Q&A section. If you disagree with me and you think I'm being mean or harsh, you can leave comments in the Q&A section. Are you using BizSpeak? Dick Clark was an American TV producer and host. Now, it may seem funny to some of you, even those of you who remember Dick Clark, to have him on this list of great communicators, great speakers, someone with great presentation skills. But bear with me. He had a career where he was on TV for nearly 60 years. American Bandstand, New Year's Eve celebrations, all sorts of other specials. And here's the thing, you probably don't remember anything that he said. So why am I including him on this list? It's because Dick Clark was great at what he did. He put a spotlight on other people, other musicians, other performers, other entertainers. Now, I'm sure he had an ego, but when he was on camera speaking, communicating to millions of people, he didn't try to steal the spotlight for himself. He didn't try to hog it. He didn't try to say me, 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 me. He wasn't known as someone who had any singing talent, comedy talent, acting talent. He was really good at just being a presenter. Now, he's a great business person and producer as well. But he was good at presenting the basic facts, what the next act is, what the next song is, the biographical information. There is a role for that. Many of you may be in a situation where you have to be a facilitator, introduce other people in your company, your industry at events. Dick Clark could be a great role model for you. So take a look at the clip below, and you can see he's understated, he's not showy, he's not overly dramatic, emotional. It's not about me, me, me. He puts the spotlight on other people, other entertainers, other talents. That's what made him a great presenter. Take a look. You didn't think I could put together a list like this without including Winston Churchill, did you? Churchill is the most famous Prime Minister of Great Britain of all time. He is certainly known throughout the world as a great speaker, great communicator. Why is this? Now, there have been numerous movies about him, a gazillion books. There's a lot to really study here if you're fascinated by Churchill, but I want to cover what I think are the most important things for the average person to relate to. One thing I hear from clients all over the world when I come to train them, for example, be on TV the first time or to give a major speech, a lot of times people are filled with insecurities of, oh, I'm not good looking enough, or I'm a behind the scenes person, or I'm too short, or not thin enough, or all these issues. That's why I like to have people look at Winston Churchill. Here's a guy who is short, bald, portly, has a lisp, has an actual speech impediment, and stutters, and by the standards of his time, did not have a very prestigious college education. And yet, look at what he did. He went on to become the most famous speaker of Great Britain, depending on your list, one or two best speakers of the 20th century. And he did it even though he had some deficiency. So watch the video. Now when you see him, quite often you're so overwhelmed by this great mystique of the great Winston Churchill, sometimes it's easy to miss the flaws. But listen, you can in fact hear a lisp, a speech impediment. It's not just an accent. You can hear actual stammering, and yet it didn't matter. His passion came through. Winston Churchill was someone who had a real love of words, a love of language. He would rewrite speeches. He famously said it would take him 2 weeks to come up with a quick impromptu speech at a dinner party. He's someone who really put a lot of time, energy, and effort into every aspect of it. Now, even when he read his speech, he still gave great eye contact to his audience, great passion, hand motions, energy, force, and he was very theatrical. During the war, he famously would finish his speech and then instantly dash out of the room as if he were off to solve another great world problem. And he may have been in a hurry, but sometimes it just added to the overall mystique. He was a big believer in props. He had big, thick, horn-rimmed glasses that he would take off and play with. He liked the pinstripe suit. Sometimes he would have a watch, a pocket watch. Very decorative. He really did put a lot of time into every aspect of his image, how he looked, how he sounded, exactly what words he wanted to use. And he was not afraid to be powerful, to attack, to be extremely vivid compared to so many people in politics who want to be bland and diffuse. So watch this video that I've linked to below. Watch others. Check out some movies about Winston Churchill, too. He really is a fabulous communicator and a tremendous presenter. Steve Harvey is an American comedian and actor, and he is omnipresent. It seems as though there are days when it doesn't matter what channel you flip on, there he is on a show, and it's a completely different show. He hosts numerous TV shows. He writes New York Times bestsellers. He is just omnipresent. And his radio shows. I mean, the guy doesn't seem to sleep. Now, he is a professional comedian, so he is able to inject humor in what he does. But part of what he does well as a presenter is he just exudes the sense he's happy to be there. Part of it is a smile. Part of it is his tone of voice. And this is something great communicators have in common. They don't go into any presentation with the idea, okay, let's get it over with. I'm here to dump the facts, or I'm here to do a job. No. They exude the sense of, wow, it's great to be here today to share with you these ideas or these topics or these subjects we're dealing with. And that's what Steve Harvey does. So I want you to watch below, and you can see him do stand-up comedy, hosting shows, Family Feud, you name it. All of these shows are a little bit different, but how he speaks is typically the same. He's relaxed, he's conversational, he's loose, he's friendly, he doesn't seem stuck up, he doesn't seem pretentious in any way. That's what makes him a great presenter, and it's also making him really in demand, because it seems as though TV producers, at least in America, can't even think of anyone else to host shows these days other than Steve Harvey. Take a look, see what you like, comment on it in the discussion group. Ronald Reagan, the great communicator. He was called that by friend and foe alike because Ronald Reagan was, in fact, really good at communicating. He was a master at the set speech. He also did well in debates. And he was just fantastic at taking ideas, expressing them in a way where you knew he believed it intellectually, here were the facts, but here's how he felt about it as well. What's less known about Reagan was his work ethic towards major presentations. People just assume, oh, well, of course he's a good speaker, he was an actor, he's a natural at it. No. When Ronald Reagan had to give a really important speech, like a State of the Union address, he had tremendous discipline. First of all, he would meet with his staff members, his speechwriters, for months, going through ideas for the speech. He would then come up with ideas, look at drafts, give notes, give feedback. He then would force them to finish the speech 1 week before it was due. This way, he's not doing last-minute edits 5 minutes before the speech is given. It gave him time to read it out loud every night for hours for a week before the State of the Union address. Not to memorize it, just to get more familiar with the words, to build a bond with the words, to build a relationship with the words, to get really comfortable with the whole speech. But even that wasn't enough. He would then spend an entire day doing videotaped rehearsal with the speech so that when he was reading the words off the teleprompter, it didn't seem like he was reading words off the teleprompter. It felt like he was just speaking to you from the heart. Now, Ronald Reagan obviously knew about stagecraft since he was an actor. He gave tremendous importance to every aspect of how things looked. For example, you would never see Ronald Reagan walking up to a lectern holding his speech the way you would see George Bush or others. He wanted to create the illusion of just talking to people. So what he did is he had his notes mostly on note cards, 3x5, 4x6 note cards. He would have them in his left suit pocket. So when he walked up on stage and got behind a lectern, he could walk with his hands free. He could get up there, wave with one hand, pull the notes out without anyone see it, put on the lectern, then wave with the other hand, and now his notes are in front of him. Nobody ever saw him touch his notes. He was then careful to start off by looking at people, then dipping down to look at his notes. He is one of the few politicians who was actually good at reading from notes and delivering a speech. Most people can't do that. Masterful communicator. For big speeches, he did practice a lot, but he was also good on the fly. If there was an emergency, like the Challenger shuttle exploding and he had to address the nation, he could do it really well, quickly then too. But he's someone who didn't take it for granted. When he knew it was a big speech, he knew he had time, he would work on it, craft it. Now, as president, he obviously had speechwriters, but Reagan was a good writer himself. Before he became president, he did daily 5-minute political commentaries on radio, sometimes television. He wrote them out by hand himself, and he spoke constantly. Reagan also knew that when you speak, it's not about what's interesting to you, it's about what's interesting to the audience. So he gave virtually the same speech from 1964 to 1980 when he first ran for president, when he first burst on the national scene at the 64 Republican political convention, nominating Goldwater, to his own nomination for president in 1980. He spoke all over the country repeatedly, hitting the same conservative political themes. He did it again and again and again. He got better at it and better at it and better at it. And even though he'd been in the communication business for decades, being behind a camera, being a sports announcer, speaking in front of a live audience is different. It's a different type of presentation. And he was a real student of that. And he learned how to get better and better and better. Go ahead, take a look at this clip and figure out for yourself, what do you like about what he did? What do you not like? I'm hoping you'll notice things like the way he uses his voice. Now, while Reagan admired John F. Kennedy, who was basically the same age, and other earlier orators, he realized in the modern TV era, you can't yell. It's too hot for the medium. So you'll never see Reagan yell during his speech. He might boost the volume a little and then even whisper. He really uses his voice well for the modern medium of TV. Check it out. Jesse Jackson, in his prime, was one of the most powerful public speakers I've ever seen. He is a well-known American civil rights activist, ran for president in 1984 and 88, and gave some of the most rousing speeches at political conventions ever seen. What Jesse Jackson did so well is speak with tremendous passion, and he would even rhyme. He would say things like, put hope in your brains, not dope in your veins. And you just couldn't help but laugh, smile, but it was memorable. It made the point. This is someone who was a master at presenting his ideas to the news media, getting tremendous attention. Now, he is still alive as of this posting, as of this creation in 2018 for this course. He's not as active as he once was. That's why I'm using was instead of is. I urge you to take a look at the speech below that I've selected for you. And I think what you're going to find is someone who just has tremendous passion. There's energy, the feeling that comes out. Here's the thing about Jesse Jackson. He certainly wasn't born a natural speaker. He was born in poverty, and he had a severe stuttering problem. But he overcame that. So ask yourself, do you have any problems like severe stuttering, severe poverty that you're dealing with? If so, you're in good company. If not, what do you have to complain about? Because Jesse Jackson has spoken to millions and millions throughout his country and all over the globe as well, and had a huge impact on political debates and in the civil rights movement. So take a look below. He certainly is a character who has some controversy, as almost all the political speakers I'm referencing in this course have controversy. They're not all universally beloved. But listen to him. Whether you agree or disagree with his politics or policies, there is almost a music to his voice and a rhythm that is quite captivating. Take a look, comment in the Q&A section. Comedian Robin Williams was a mainstay on American television, sitcoms, talk shows, the stand-up world from the 1970s until his death in 2014. Many people, including myself, marveled at his ability to just seemingly be so spontaneous on a talk show, whether it's The Tonight Show or anything else, go into so many different voices, riffs, different directions, zigging, zagging, and make it all seem like it just happened to him. Well, here's the thing. None of that was spontaneous. It was all rehearsed in front of live audiences, quite often small comedy clubs, for weeks at a time. In order to seem spontaneous, it might be the product of hours and hours and hours of work over weeks. I'm a little reluctant to use famous comedians sometimes as public speaking experts because it is so much more work to be a great comedian than it is, in my view, to be simply a great presenter, communicator, public speaker. But it's still interesting and fun to watch the masters, to see how they're able to get laughs from audience, how they're able to create change with their voice, their body, their face, their eye, their height. Everything about them is changing when they're communicating. That's why I'd urge you, look at the clip. I'm not expecting you to be as funny as Robin Williams or any professional comedian when you're giving your next PowerPoint presentation. But I do want you to look at and study the sheer amount of variation in speed, tone, volume, body position, hand motion, face motion. Take a look and comment in the Q&A section. Rush Limbaugh is the most successful talk radio show host in the United States, perhaps ever. Certainly of the last 30 years. He's been on the air every day for 3 hours, coast to coast, and heard around the world, too, in some places, 3 hours a day. Now, he doesn't have guests, folks. Anyone who thinks it's easy to talk for 3 hours a day, essentially to yourself, has never hosted a 3-hour talk radio show. I know I've hosted 3-hour talk shows before. It's hard to do. You can run out of things to say. You certainly can start to bore yourself. Now, he's a controversial figure for a number of political comments. We're not here to talk about the politics. In fact, I would urge you, if you don't like Rush Limbaugh's politics, watch the clip below. Try to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, because I do believe he is one of the most masterful communicators of the last half century, certainly within the United States. He's able to keep an audience, whether it's still 20 million, 15 million, it's still huge. The audience he has and his ability to really convey ideas about politics in the world to people who share similar values. I'll never forget the first time I heard Rush Limbaugh. I was hosting a daily political talk show in a small town in Florida, in Tallahassee, WTAL radio. And my producer came up to me and said, "Hey, you got to see this." And he pushed in a VHS tape into a VCR. I thought it was going to be something inappropriate for the workplace. It wasn't. It was a video of Rush Limbaugh giving a speech. Back then he had a so-called Rush to Excellence tour. This would have been 1989. The year before is when Rush Limbaugh started his national talk radio show in 1988. So as of this recording day, he's been on for 30 years. Now, what Rush does so well, and what he really used to do very well in the first 5 years or so of his talk show, was he had a lot of creativity in the way he looked at old issues through a new light. He also used a lot more humor, audio clips, music clips, sound effects, and there was a tremendous amount of creativity. I don't think he's as creative as he used to be, but in his prime, he was masterful at the particular medium of radio. Was not as successful on television. He doesn't really get out and do that much public speaking anymore, but he is still speaking to millions of people every single day and has tremendous influence on politics campaigns here in the United States. You may have someone like this in your country as well. Even if you don't like them, listen to them. You can learn from them. So watch the clip below and see if you can figure out what he's doing. Why has he been able to reach 20 million people every day for 30 years, and most people can't even get family members at the dinner table to listen to them, even though the opinions might be the same? Take a look, analyze it, figure out what's working and what's not working. I can tell you, one of the things you'll notice is it's not all scripted out and written out. He's thinking. There's stops and starts. There's sputtering. You hear the rattling of the paper, of notes of stories he's looking at. So it really works for this medium of radio, which is different than television. It's different than a scripted show. It's different than stand-up comedy. It's its own thing, and he is the master of it. Ellen DeGeneres is one of the most widely successful TV talk show hosts ever, certainly in the last decade. Her show is wildly popular here in the United States. What is her appeal as a communicator? A part of it, as you can see in the clip below, she just comes across as genuine, as likable, as friendly. She is a professional comedian. That's her background, so humor is infused with everything she does. But she comes across in a way where you just feel like she doesn't have a hateful bone in her body. She comes across as a nice person, likable, friendly. She's not always trying to get the last word in. She really listens to her guests. She shows sympathy. And she just comes across as normal and average. She's not better looking than the average person. She's not a better dancer than the average person, even though she comes in dancing on her shows. She just comes across as someone completely comfortable in her own skin. Now, part of what makes her successful is she's just out there. She's been in this business for numerous decades. She's had ups, she's had downs. But she kind of looks the same. She kind of sounds the same. The public has changed. There was a time she came out as gay, lost her primetime sitcom, and sort of had to go into hiding for a while. Was very unpopular for a while, did other projects, then got her daily TV talk show, and it's been phenomenally successful. It's hard for most people to even remember 20 years ago when it was considered kind of a big deal that she was gay. Oh, isn't that bad? A lot of people thought. Those days are long gone. One of the things that I do think is great as a role model for any type of presenter, any speaker, is the discipline comedians have. Because really good comedians were used to performing stand-up in dingy little clubs, nightclubs, comedy clubs all over the country. sometimes 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 sets a night. Comedians in New York City, when they're first starting, often bounce around from one comedy club to another. They might be in 6 comedy clubs in one night. Even if you're not the world's greatest comic, it's virtually impossible not to learn things about public speaking, about presenting, about reading an audience, about timing, when you are in front of so many audiences live, hearing people, getting feedback, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. So I think that was fantastic grounding for Ellen DeGeneres, and it's one reason why you see so many former stand-up comedians hosting shows. They simply have more experience under their belt for reacting to people in live situations. So I know this is supposed to be about Ellen DeGeneres, but if you ever get an opportunity to take a live stand-up comedy class or perform open mic, do it, even if you're awful. And I've done it before and I was awful. But even if you do it and you're awful, you'll still learn a lot. You'll learn about how to be a better communicator and a better presenter. Watch the clip of Ellen and then write in the discussion section, the Q&A section of this course, what you like, what you don't like. Former President Barack Obama, to me, is a fascinating case on the power of public speaking. If you go back in time to 2004 and looked at Barack Obama, you would say, here's somebody with a funny name, doesn't have any personal wealth, doesn't have family wealth, doesn't have family connections, has lost his only bid for federal office when he ran for Congress, had been in a low-level legislative position. What does he really have going for himself? And he went from there in one speech to being the front runner for the 2008 Democratic nomination and became president in 2008, elected in 2008. I would argue, and this is not in any way to diminish other accomplishments of his, it was based entirely on his public speaking skills, specifically his 2004 Democratic Convention keynote speech, shown below. Take a look at it. It is a masterpiece. Here's what people don't really know about Barack Obama. Only a few years earlier, he was giving speeches all the time, presentations, as a law professor at the University of Chicago. And guess what? Students thought he was boring, ponderous, just a boring lecturer. He learned. He got better. He improved. He rehearsed that speech a great deal. And he really got to the point where he was much more comfortable with it. Now, when you're giving a political speech like this at a convention, you're using a teleprompter. Most politicians are not very good at this because they're not using them that often. So the big problem most people have with teleprompters is they freeze their head, and all of a sudden they start to speak at the same speed, the same tone, the same volume. They don't pause. And that makes anybody look and sound boring. Obama took the time to learn how to use a teleprompter, and he learned the basics, which is you got to keep moving your face. You got to keep moving your head, your hands. You have to sometimes speak a little louder, sometimes a little softer, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, and occasionally you have to pause. That is what makes someone good at reading a teleprompter. Sounds simple when I say it that way. So few politicians bother to learn the basics. He did. It served him well for that keynote speech. It also served him well on the presidential campaign and in office and for re-election too. Now, I could talk a lot about Barack Obama, and I have. So further along in this course, I have an entire hour-long video analyzing all of his major early speeches in his campaign and earlier career. So if you're really interested, take a look at that. But for right now, look at his 2004 speech, his keynote speech that really made a name for him, and figure out what's he doing well. What is it he's doing that you could also do? Post your comments in the chat. Comedian Joan Rivers had a career that spanned 50 years till she passed away in 2014. And she was wildly successful, but I do think there are things she did that anyone can try to do as well. Something she did well, whether she was a guest on a talk show, whether she was doing stand-up comedy, whether she was hosting shows, she was never afraid to make fun of herself. Now, I'm not suggesting you have to talk about how ugly you are, your plastic surgery, but she always did that. I'm not saying she was ugly, but she always talked about how ugly she was and how many plastic surgery she had. So she didn't come across as arrogant. It made her more likable to people. The other thing that she did so well is she was utterly fearless. She would say anything. She didn't care how offensive it was. You got the sense she was telling you what she really thought. And I'm not suggesting you rip apart your boss or say how the founder of your company is ugly or stupid. But if you can build a reputation for yourself as someone who really does say the honest truth, even if it occasionally can offend certain interest, that's going to help you as a presenter. If you can occasionally make fun of yourself or act like you don't think you're perfect, that will make you even more likable as a communicator. Now, Joan Rivers had a tremendous work ethic. She was always on the go. More cable shows, more TV shows, appearances, talk radio shows, stand-up. I'll never forget one time I saw her in a stand-up comedy club in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, and she was already, it had been over 70. She was doing a stand-up comedy show from like 7 to 8:30 in the evening. Probably finished around 9. She was working on new material for a Broadway show. She actually had her notes on the floor. It was still funny. As soon as it finished, she said, "I've got to run." She was dashing. Her car was waiting for her to go to QVC so she could tape segments selling her own jewelry on QVC starting at 2 in the morning. Work, 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 work. She presented, she communicated, she was tireless, whether it was hawking her own wares, being a guest on other shows, hosting cable shows, comedy shows, being a guest. She was everywhere, and she just got better and better and better. Take a look right in the Q&A section, what you like, what you don't like. If you don't think she's funny, that's okay. But that's not really what you learn by watching someone like Joan Rivers speak. Fidel Castro was certainly one of the most powerful, riveting speakers of the second half of the 20th century. He is really known for how long some of his speeches were. He once gave a speech for more than 7 hours. He once spoke for 4.5 hours just at the United Nations. Now, you have to have a tremendous, tremendous passion for public speaking, for communicating, to speak for 7 hours. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that he should be your role model as far as now give 7-hour speeches. That isn't going to work most of the time for most people. In fact, I would say it rarely works. But again, we're not here to talk about politics and dictatorship and right wing and left wing and America. Not here to talk about politics. So I don't want you to think I'm endorsing anyone here in this particular section of the course. But Fidel Castro's speaking did serve him well. Now, people think of him as, well, he could speak for 7 hours because if you're a dictator, you can control what people do. If they don't like it or pay attention, you lock them up. But they forget. When Castro rose to power, he didn't have the state behind him. He didn't have great wealth behind him. He didn't have many assets at all, but he did have his charisma. He did have his ability to speak to his fellow revolutionaries. He had his ability to speak and build a following in the countryside of Cuba and to foment revolution. That takes the ultimate in presentation skills. If you can convince people to turn against their own government, to revolt, to risk their own lives for a cause, you do not do that unless you are a great communicator. So Fidel Castro, whatever other flaws there were, and there were many, he was a fantastic, powerful communicator. Now, you can look at parts of this clip I'm going to show you and others and see him yelling and screaming, almost seem like a madman. You may think, how could anyone fall for that? It's a different experience if you're there in a crowd watching it and you're seeing it from a distance. Even if when you are watching it on video, the passion comes through. The sense that he really, really believes this comes through. And for some people, that's infectious. Take a look. Leave your comments in the Q&A section. Bill Maher is an American comedian and political talk show host who's been active since the 1970s. For the last quarter of a century, he's had his own nighttime show on major TV networks. First it was Politically Incorrect. Now it is Real Time with Bill Maher at HBO. He's had a tremendously long career. It's had ups and downs, but I believe he deserves inclusion here as one of the best communicators because in part of how consistent he is with his beliefs, how he injects humor into everything, and because of how fearless he is. He has a different style. He hits his political opponents much, much more forcefully, in a much more vicious way. Because of that, he has a more polarized audience. The people who hate him really, really, really hate him. The people who love him, however, really love him. Great communicators, I believe, are true to themselves, true to their audience, true to their fans, and they don't worry about trying to be all things to all people. One of the biggest mistakes anyone can make when they're trying to give presentations, talks, speeches, is to be defensive the whole time, to spend all their time not trying to offend anyone and trying to appeal to everyone. They end up being boring. Mush. Now, I'm not suggesting you have to go as far as Bill Maher the next time you're giving a corporate presentation and you talk about what idiots or fools your competitors are. I'm not suggesting that. But I do want you to look at how he frames his arguments. There's a logic, and he's its own style. He's not trying to be Mr. Everyman. He's not trying to be Joe Sixpack or the average Joe. He's very happy that people know he is the rich Hollywood liberal elite who, frankly, looks down upon people who support politicians he doesn't like. He's okay with that. He's not trying to fake people out. He's not trying to be a phony. But what really makes him so attractive as a speaker is he's consistently funny. If you watch his opening monologue, unless you just hate his politics, you're going to laugh every couple of seconds, and you're going to think that makes a really good point. The other thing he does well is he doesn't try to make himself the star of every conversation. It is his show. He does get to speak at the beginning, all by himself, his monologue. He does get the end. But he really does let his guests speak, and he has guests of varying viewpoints. They aren't just people who agree with him. And that makes a more interesting dynamic. So take a look at the link below. See what you like about Bill Maher. See what you don't like about Bill Maher. Because let's not forget, part of being a great communicator can be simply getting people to talk about you more, even if the talk is about how much they hate you. Post your comments. The world of finance is typically dominated by men. It's a male-dominated field. But Susie Orman stands out. She's done extraordinarily well in this field of personal finance. She has TV shows, infomercials, radio shows, books. She is a multimedia conglomerate, and she speaks from the stage at rallies, events, trade associations all over the country, selling her ideas of how people should manage their personal finances more effectively. Now, if you listen to enough personal finance experts, after a while, most of them say the same thing. Get rid of bad debt, cut your spending, be very careful about where you invest, diversify, use low-cost index funds. There's a lot of the same information out there. What Susie Orman does well, though, is she really bonds with her audience. She gives them the sense that I'm not some highfalutin banker who went to Harvard Business School wearing the three-piece pinstripe suit. I'm just like one of you. I'm one of your girlfriends. Her education is that of a social worker. It's not MBA finance. She's someone who was a waitress before she really got into this field. So she's much more relatable to people. She's not afraid to be funny, to throw out zingers, to really show personality. I've seen her from the stage before, and she comes across as funny, likable, and it doesn't matter if she's talking to 5 people or 15,000 people. She sounds like she's talking to one girlfriend over a cup of coffee. It's a loose conversational style, relaxed, it's friendly, it's non-threatening, and yet she's not afraid to say, cut up your credit card. She's not afraid to be stern. And so she can come across almost like a motherly figure, really telling you what's best for your long-term future and your short-term financial future. Take a look at the clip. Figure out what you like, don't like about how she communicates, and post your comments in the Q&A section.
Okay, we'll stop here. Before we end the lessons, anyone has any comments or questions? I think many of you have been in this course from the very beginning until now. You also have a what you call taken a lot of notes on the course, and we gone very deep into the presentation. It's new, and for now we are looking at a different style of presenting. So I'm not sure whether you have developed your own style of presenting, whether it's English or in Bahasa Indonesia. So it is good that you benefit from what is presented here, because at the end of the day, throughout life, whether you are talking to a friend or talking to a group of people, you still require to present your idea. So there are, from my own experience is that, let's say you are going for a group dinner, and then you start to talk about something, and then within the group, someone will be more vocal, and you try to give your opinion, or you try to speak. So how do you go about doing that? How do you present your idea